Hello, everybody. Today is Sunday, July 29th, and we're bringing you Block Digest 117 at block height 534,289. What's going on, Rick?
Hey, man, just enjoying this cool summer day. It feels like we're starting to get over the hump of the heat of summer here, starting to get these cooler days. It's pretty nice, but it's dreary, but it's all right. How's it been going?
Summer, is that some strange thing that happens outside? I don't know what this
Yeah,
word means.
gotta live somewhere where there's seasons.
What's going on, Jeannie?
We have seasons here, but for right now, it's just hot everywhere.
Yeah, gotta catch a break from that. Need some clouds.
Bum, 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 bum. Summer is fun. Okay. No, but wait, I don't know what summer is. Wait a minute, I don't know what I'm saying. Oh my god. Yeah, okay. Back to
summer.
making. Wait, what? Summer?
Well,
okay, all right. Back to making.
The summer jokes are over. So, let's see what's going on in the crazy world of crypto, man. What's going on?
Well, a little preface to this first story. I'm sure everybody out there has seen the CNBC headline about an ETF where they pretty much just posted a one-sentence story that the Winklevoss first ever Bitcoin ETF was denied, with the little caption, "This is an evolving story, things may change." And then just ninja edited all kinds of details 25 minutes later after letting that headline float all over the place. And the price took a fucking giant dive. So one thing I want to say about that is, I mean, when you look at agencies like the SEC complaining about market manipulation, I think it's really hilarious how they never look at the media with things like that. Because when you really think about it, most retail investors, they follow headlines. They don't dig deep into information. I mean, that's why people like us do shows like this. They just see ETF. They know that the SEC is considering ETFs again. They don't know who's proposing what. They don't know how many are there in a lot of cases. And CNBC just puts up ETF denied with no context, no clarification that it was a proposal from last year that had already been rejected, despite that being, publicly known for about a year. They left that out of the initial story, which was just one sentence, despite the fact that this was clearly a proposed change to a pre-rejected proposal that has been known about for a year. They leave those details out of the one sentence headline, and they just ninja edit it 25 minutes later and put all of that context in later. So given that and the clarification that came out after the market crashed with this decision, Commissioner Hester Pierce publicly posted a dissent from the decision. And honestly, when you really dive into the meat of this, it really goes to show pretty much what the SEC is doing is just way beyond its purview and its responsibility. And they're pretty much just kind of being very prejudiced against dealing with proposals for Bitcoin products. So this is pretty much a multi-point breakdown, kind of explaining all of her arguments on why she dissented from the rejection of the update to the Winklevoss proposal. And first off, she points at Section 6B5 of the Exchange Act, which is one of the conditions that ETF products or exchange-traded products have to meet in order to be approved for listing. Okay. Where is the exact thing? Securities, okay, in part, the rules of a national securities exchange must be designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices and to protect investors in the public interest. So the SEC pretty much took this rule, and then instead of looking at this ETF product, looking at the exchange, the registered licensed exchange it would be traded on, just ran off and started looking at other Bitcoin markets. You know, the general spot market, which is pretty much not regulated at all, and started critiquing markets that had nothing to do with this ETF product. So her breakdown of this is pretty much they're just completely misinterpreting this rule and misapplying it in order to, again, like I said, be prejudiced against Bitcoin or crypto-related exchange-traded products. This part of the act, this rule, it involves the actual exchange-traded product and the registered exchange that it trades on, and the rules that specific exchange enacts and has in place to prevent market manipulation and create, you know, a safe environment for investors. It has nothing to do with the overall marketplace of other exchanges that whatever underlying thing to this product is based on. And she even further goes to kind of break down like the history of how things like the SEC evolved. They came out of self-regulatory organizations. In other words, voluntary regulation by marketplaces themselves that was not enforced by government entities. And also goes to look at, you know, all kinds of other commodity markets. I mean, for instance, let's look at oil. Oil is so blatantly, obviously manipulated for geopolitical reasons on a constant basis. Was that used as a rationale to refuse listing oil products on registered exchanges? No, it wasn't. And the entire rationale that the SEC used looking at the underlying Bitcoin market as a reason for rejecting this proposal, it is not in line at all for exchange traded products for other commodities. They have pretty much selectively applied this in a way that is totally inconsistent with how the SEC has approached product they've been regulating. So these are two things. Like, one, this interpretation of the rule that they used as a justification to deny this proposal is a misinterpretation of the rule in Ms. Hester's opinion. And as well, the kind of analysis beyond misapplying them, completely inconsistent with how they've treated all kinds of other exchange traded products for other commodities. And so she pretty much calls out like this is nonsense, and then further goes on to explain that denying this product is in fact going to prevent the maturation of this market. It's going to prevent institutions from coming in with liquidity and tightening up arbitrage between different exchanges, which is going to put more eyes on individual traders, going to bring more stability to prices across the entire market. And in other words, like, not only are they misinterpreting the rule that they used as justification, not only are they being completely inconsistent in their applying this misinterpretation versus all the other commodities out there that have ETPs, but they are in fact pretty much guaranteeing that the condition they're setting in order to list an exchange traded product is never going to happen by refusing this proposal in the first place. So her entire analysis here, it's just like the SEC is playing selective games in which they are being much more nitpicky about this product because it is Bitcoin related and just not at all consistent in their general actions. Okay. Sorry, Rick, I just a little bit more to break through.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
But you know, it's kind of just showing like the arguments are very self-serving, and they're pretty much setting the SEC up to play gatekeeper on innovation. And like, you know, part of her reasoning along those lines is that, you know, compared to the SEC, participants in this market have a much better understanding of something like Bitcoin and whether or not they actually want to put it in their portfolio, hold it directly, gain exposure to it. And it explicitly kind of says like, you know, this is a new thing. It could easily succeed. It could easily fail, but the SEC are not the people equipped or informed to really decide which of those outcomes is more likely. And that the way they're inconsistently applying rules kind of being completely hypocritical in their assessments of the market overall, and ignoring how their actions are actually exacerbating the problems that they're pointing out as justification for refusing this product. They're pretty much setting themselves up as gatekeepers to decide what new things should be allowed to kind of integrate themselves into American markets. And also she points out the dynamic of mining as far as the production of blocks and the place that mining equipment is housed being distributed all over the world. And aside from moving to where there's cheap electricity, it's not in any single place. In other words, it's kind of way better protected from the kinds of geopolitical manipulation and games that all kinds of other commodities, again, I'll point to oil as the easy example, are, because they are very much geographically concentrated. Just look at, countries like Venezuela, or like the Middle Eastern countries in OPEC or Russia. Like, the concentration of these assets creates an inevitable dynamic that leads to political-based manipulation, because those assets are concentrated in specific countries who are going to interact with them to their benefit. Whereas with Bitcoin mining, it's widely distributed, it's easy to move around, it's self-regulating and adjusting. And she pretty much is just like in this last part here going like that this is not the role of the SEC. The role of the SEC is to offer consumer protection, create diverse options for consumers to make their own choices, and specifically allow free markets and innovation to compete and come to their own result. And so pretty much like the gist of her dissent is they are misinterpreting the rules they're using as justification. They are being completely inconsistent in their rationale with Bitcoin versus other commodities that have a litany of exchange traded products on the market. And they're pretty much just trying to act as those who decide which things succeed or fail in the market. And none of those things fall in line with the stated purpose and mandate of the SEC. So she's pretty much just calling them out on bullshit.
Well, I guess that's the good news from this, right? Like you're saying, this statement from CNBC, it kind of just poor state of journalism we're at, where it's like, they just copy and paste the whole article, and it causes this. I think there was a little bit of a price drop there and a rebound with the news coming out, and like you're saying, she's just saying that we're holding up this these self-regulatory bodies to come in to form this framework that's really needed. I mean, recently some guys from the CFTC were saying just how far behind we are, and we see other nations like Switzerland and nations that really need it, like Venezuela and Russia and other nations, just really putting together that whole regulatory framework and these different onboards where investment, these institutional investors can come on and not have really too much more to worry about than the way things stand right now. They have a little bit more confidence with the market, because over there they sort of set up these bodies, these frameworks, and these ways to get in. And the SEC, it seems like all these government agencies, they kind of have like a little bit of a back and forth there in between the agency as far as what things should be, how things should be run, and how things should be done. And with crypto and this large market cap and people moving around large amounts of money, I could see there being some people with some motivation to try and kick these things down the road and try and do this. But it's really hurting the nation. I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to get in place to where we can be prepared for, any sort of problem that comes up in the future here with the current traditional market. And it's just like we're getting left behind. And it's a good thing that she came out to say this. And, I've heard a lot about ETFs this year, last year. I mean, these things, they feel inevitable. So like all these kick can down the road, feels like maybe they're just trying to buy a little bit at a cheaper price before they know that they can have these things for regular people just trying to get in from these traditional markets. And yeah, they've got to, I mean, I don't know how much longer they could kick this can down the road, because it really does feel like, I don't know, retail Lightning transactions are going to come online not too far distant future. I'm pretty sure they'd like to have that regulatory framework in place before that sort of thing takes off. So, yeah, the SEC and CNBC, come on, man. This is getting a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
I mean, honestly, my expectations for financial journalists are so low because basically there are two species of journalists. One of them is going extinct, the one that actually challenges power structures and seeks the truth, and isn't afraid to challenge governments or corporations or large international entities. That kind of journalist is going away. The other kind of journalist is the one that just peddles bullshit all day and wants clickbait. And, financial journalists are in that group. They're probably the lowest of the low in that group. And basically what they spend most of their day doing is making backroom deals with, some large holders in whatever particular stock or commodity they're focusing on for that particular week. And they're like, hey, if we put out a story that makes a bunch of retail investors panic sell, you can get some cheap offers for that. So like that's basically how they spend every single day of their life. They're like, what kind of negative stories can we put out that makes, whatever asset or stock or whatever temporarily crash so that all of our buddies here in the back can like buy it up cheap. That's basically all they do. Like, sorry, financial journalists, you're you're not impressive. You're getting less and less impressive by the day.
Yeah, I think Forbes is the new National Enquirer. Just about, man. It is bad. I mean, it's really bad whenever the profit model and everything just drives away this what is really needed for the public. They need to know, proper information, and really the global economic crisis that could be looming here because of large amounts of fractional reserve banking going on a monumental level. It's really, really putting a lot of people at a greater risk. It really needs to be taken as like, I'm not going to say an attack against the nation, but geez, man, it's definitely not good for the nation. People need to get this stuff together to where when something does happen, there is like instruments in place that are going to help people. But I don't know, there's this profit model, like you're saying, just, hey, we'll do this today, we'll grit that, and we'll reset. That's where it's like, I don't really like all that manipulation part of the stuff. I understand how it goes on, but I don't know what we can do to fix it. Maybe can do something like that Thunder message we're going to talk about later.
Kill all journalists. No, don't really. That's
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I mean, I'm not worried about Bitcoin. Like, we saw what happened at the end of last year. It went all of that way with absolutely no help from these so-called regulators and, their positive influence on the ability for innovation to get whatever positive press, doesn't need them. And to be honest, like, I don't exactly look at the SEC as Shinobi showed with this one woman who clearly showed that they're either not competent in their own rules or they're massaging their own rules in order to get their way. If I was to bet where any concentration of people who are manipulating the prices of things would be, it would probably be in the SEC. So let's just say I'm not too worried about Bitcoin, and I'm not too confident in the SEC to clean up their act or anyone else's act.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like the money that wants to get its way into Bitcoin is going to find whatever way it needs to. But like things like this being denied, like introduce more friction. I mean, like in it, for instance, an ETF, like that's an easy exposure for people who want to take retirement funds. Like, there's like the entire like pension crisis looming in the West right now is really something that is just gearing up to literally destroy an entire fucking generation. And I mean, to not like allow products like this, it introduces losses for them. Like there is more difficulty for them to gain exposure. There's more chance of them to actually lose money in terms of, fucking up with key management. There's all kinds of tax implications when you can't just expose yourself directly through a 401k or like a pension fund gain exposure. And I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt Bitcoin, but it will hurt people who want that exposure, who are being denied this option. And, it's as much as I stand by caveat emptor, like buyer beware. It is nice to at least see somebody in this position, like in some place like the SEC, calling them out on their own bullshit. Like, I don't think it should exist, but there are clear reasons and guidelines for its existence. And the people occupying those positions right now are pretty much completely ignoring that and playing games for their own benefit or the benefit of the legacy system as it exists now. And it's just I like seeing somebody call that out. Like, what you're doing now is not what you're supposed to be doing under your own mandate. So even though I don't think that it should exist in the first place, if you're going to exist, you have a mandate, you have a direction, you have things you're supposed to do. So actually fucking do it, or you're just creating more evidence for why you should not exist in the first place.
Yeah, it seems to be a problem all the way up those agencies. Just like, I don't know, people trying to figure out if they're actually what laws they're supposed to follow and what laws they're supposed to enforce, and just like all this vague language in the laws and the way that they're translated as far as these senators and congressmen and the way that they place it and their definitions of things. It's just so confusing out there that it gives enough of that ability to where these guys can do this stuff, and what do they just get, like a paddling from the SEC, from within the SEC saying, you guys shouldn't be doing this. And like Janine's saying, I mean, I think they will continue to do this sort of thing. So eventually we're just going to have to, shake all these guys off that are trying to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, let's see how things play out. At least there's very clear there's one person pushing for the Van Eck proposal to go through. So I guess.
Right. I mean, seriously, on the ETF subject, what's going on? The Van Eck was the one that everybody thought was the denial whenever this news first came out. And then they realized it was just a Winklevoss appeal. Is that the way this news broke?
Yeah, the Winklevoss was appealing with a proposed rule change. Van Eck is currently pending. That's pretty much just a pure spot-based ETF actually backed by Bitcoin. And then there's another, I forget the name of, that is another appeal from a denied proposal from last year.
I mean, kind of remember in a discussion that the SEC had the parameters set to where an ETF could be auto-approved. Am I wrong in that assessment? Was that something that I heard, or is that something I trust about?
It's just a proposed change right now. It's still up for comment and actually hasn't been approved. But if that rule change is proposed, then any ETF that's just backed by the actual commodity and not exposing itself to futures or anything for the underlying would just be able to launch without having to go through an approval process.
Okay, that sounds like I don't know, just connecting the stories here. It's like one of the stories later talking about closed door meetings there with Nasdaq. Feels like maybe they're just waiting for these regulatory sort of measures to come in place to where everybody kind of does understand what they're doing, and then that'll be allowed to go through, and we'll start seeing a lot more of these, ETPs, ETFs, these sorts of instruments. I don't know. It's it's speculation, but it just seems like a sure thing. Everybody talks about these things have to come online, and the United States talks about how they're far behind in this, and everybody kind of can see the writing on the wall as far as the economic realities of our current market, and it's starting to become a hindrance for more than just the people that want to get in. I mean, people that, they're not studying it at all because the available option is not there, and the spread of that information, it really kind of has a bad feedback effect. So Let's get this thing forward.
It's either going to happen or America is just going to lose more influence. So, I mean,
That might
see how it goes. But who's ready for a funny one? Let's do a funny one.
Let's do that.
Is going to be doing transparency reports. That's right. They're going to be transparent, guys. They're going to let us know all about what's going on. Totes on the upside. Everything is all legit, guys. Totally believe it. Not. So pretty much what they're going to be doing is having a disclosure for production runs. They're going to be mostly concentrating on first runs of new equipment because that's going to have the most effect on miners and their bottom line. They're going to be promising a first paid, first ship. Bullshit! Blocking IPs that are making orders they suspect are being hoarded, and publishing detailed shipping updates openly. Yes, I totally believe that. They're also going to be self-disclosing their self-mining. Bullshit!
Really?
Okay, so I want to be clear here that I do not believe any of the insane nonsense out there. Like Bitmain has 60, 70, 80% of all the hash rate out there. But they're claiming here that they only have 1,600 petahashes. That's like I think a few percent of the network hash rate. I call complete bullshit. I don't think that they literally own and operate like in excess of 50% of the hash rate, but only a few percent. Horse shit. And I will point again to the entire Monero ASIC incident, where the hash rate skyrocketed by 80%. When Fluffy and them were kind of speculating that somebody produced ASICs, and then they hard forked, and a vast majority of that hash rate never appeared again, and it wasn't even put on sale until the announcement of the hard fork that was going to go through. Like, you who the fuck do you think you're kidding? Like, who do you think you are fucking kidding? That's bullshit. I'll believe that when you put out a list of all of the property in your name in every jurisdiction that you have like anything in, any shell companies you have set up, actually open yourself up to audit for the games hiding things through different shell companies, and actually have well-known members of the community go and independently audit. Until then, bullshit, Bitmain. Second thing, zero tolerance policy against secret mining. Secret mining is where an ASIC manufacturer may mine with newly developed equipment prior to selling or distributing equipment to customers. Bitmain itself has been unfairly accused of this. Monero, you're full of shit. In the end, Bitmain values transparency and fair competition. We therefore remain opposed to this practice and maintain our long-held zero tolerance. What the fuck do you mean zero tolerance?
Zero
what are you going to
tolerance.
do? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to slap yourself on the wrist? Are you going to fine yourself? Are you going to fucking shut down your own? Like, who the fuck do you think you're kidding? Like, this is a fucking joke. And then last, or no, wait, not last. No, I already covered number 4. But 3, we will never seek to mine empty blocks. Hey, everybody remember this? Remember back in 2016, Alex Petrov from Bitfury? Hey, does Antpool stop to mine empty blocks, Jihan? Sorry, sis man, we will continue mining empty blocks. This is the freedom given by the Bitcoin protocol. Like, how full of fucking shit can you get? Like, seriously? Like, and the shipping information, it's horseshit. Like, I bullshit. Like, because I remember You go back to SegWit activation, I cannot count the number of people who I had coming to me and telling me that they were being refused equipment sales unless they made assurances of not signaling SegWit, of literally being threatened with being cut off from access to machines if they did not stick to that policy. Like, this is the biggest fucking joke announcement I have ever seen from any company in this fucking space. And that includes Coinbase with their fucking joke of a transparency policy with coin listings. Like, this is delusional. This is Bitmain pathetically flailing around and attempting to put out a nice PR thing because they're gearing up for an IPO. Like, this is complete fucking joke.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just reminds me of that Coinbase finds Coinbase innocent of insider trading, right? It's like these new articles and these releases, they're coming out. It does sound like they're trying to project this image of legitimacy and like things are clearing up, and don't worry, Bitmain is going to be transparent about all their information, even though they're IPOing in Hong Kong and it's a Chinese company. Like, don't worry about these these shell companies or these companies being set up in Washington and Canada. And it's like we're saying, in the bigger picture of global economics, I mean, there is a real problem there with China holding a large amount of our debt. And then, if they just keep coming in here and buying up swaths of land, and I kind of worry about that possibility of like what, this economic reality of like who owns what and how that all shakes out. It's something where, yeah, I kind of worry about Jihan and all their intentions. But like you're saying, this is something where they're just saying we're going to play nice, things are going to be okay, we'll be transparent, zero tolerance on secret mining, and it just seems like there's a lot of backdoor discussion there as far as like how can we make it okay to be doing what we're doing? Well, let's just do what everybody does.
Backdoor discussion? You mean like how they were intentionally blocking SegWit and actually manipulating Litecoin the same way? Where they had the chat leaked, we can't let it activate on Litecoin because then, hey, shit, we'll have to fucking do it on Bitcoin. It'll show we're hypocrites. Like that backdoor discussion?
That's where I'm saying it's like to just say like, okay, they're going to be transparent now. That's just the way things go now. It's like a lot of times you see reports of one thing and news reports of the other, like on the ground, and then the public facing PR piece. And like we were just saying last story, the state of journalism and accountability and all that. I mean, I don't know anybody that's going to really hold the Bitmain 4 point whatever billion in revenue last year feet to the fire. It's one of those things where we're kind of just us in the know. We're probably going to keep watching this with see what reports they put out. Let's see if maybe they'll start getting a little bit more truthful in the way that we would estimate and the way that they're being reported. But for right now, it's just, yeah, it kind of reminds me of that Coinbase finds Coinbase innocent. I mean, things are just coming out to sort of clear up the image. That's what it feels like. Just trying to clean up their image.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like seriously, who the fuck do they think they're kidding? I mean, like all of this shit is documented publicly. Like the fucking inside manipulation, fucking ant bleed, ASIC boost. It might not be out there publicly documented, but there are dozens of miners who can attest to them like threatening them with no sale of hardware unless they play ball blocking SegWit. Like the fucking all the shit with the inside mining with Monero. I mean, like Jihan is literally such a moron. He didn't delete the tweet where he literally told somebody, fuck your mother if you want fuck. That's a real nice image for a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Yeah, I mean, like, Jesus Christ.
No, man, I was looking back through, I was reading the story and I started looking back through images, and it's just like some of the things that have happened in the past. It's, you're going to cause that Streisand effect if you try and just like point out, well, I don't want that on there, but there's some things out there where it's going to be pretty evident in the future. And that's where, yeah, a lot of these companies and everything we're talking about in a decentralized, like, trust model, you start breaking that trust. Yeah, it's going to be hard to earn it back.
Woo, woo. What's that? That's the sound of your business being haunted by your terrible language.
Woo.
Yeah, it's just like it is going to be really nice watching their control over this ecosystem and their influence just dwindle. I mean, like I said, I don't think the company as a whole is going anywhere for quite a while, but have the weight that they had to shove around in the Bitcoin ecosystem anymore. And it's going to be nice to watch it happen.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in what their whole, Craig Wright, Jihan, all those sort of coins. They got their hands all over the place. I don't think they're going anywhere for a while, but I don't know. We could watch this interesting drama play out, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right. Speaking of drama, incoming drama. So, over Bitcoin domain ownership. And really quick, sorry, I didn't have this actually prepped, but a lot of people in this issue set up by Yusuf over the issue of the bitcoin.org domain control immediately just started screaming, like, why are you harassing Cobra? Like, who are you to like tell somebody what to do with their property? And here, switch screen shares. Cobra specifically asked for this to be done. He literally asked for that GitHub issue to be made. And like, there's him asking Adam back to start a Reddit thread. And let me pull up this one here. Here's him explicitly asking for a GitHub issue to be made. So there, like, immediately, like, the first reaction is this issue gets just flooded by Bcash sock puppets screaming about people attempting to bully Cobra and fucking steal his website. Okay, he explicitly asked for this fucking to happen. He like so that argument, nice job at sock puppeting and PR twisting, guys. So pretty much the two proposals put up to deal with Cobra's completely erratic behavior and constantly moving closer and closer to full-on shilling Bcash is either transfer the domain to Thamos's control, because Cobra consistently keeps saying that him and Thamos are co-owners and that nothing can happen without Thamos signing off on it. Well, that's bullshit. That's a lie. Cobra is the single owner of the domain, and he can point it wherever he wants, unilaterally make whatever changes he wants, and there's absolutely nothing Thamos can do about it. So the statement that they are co-owners is a lie. The reality of the situation is he claims to respect Thamos's opinion and claims that he will never do something that Thamos doesn't want done. I call bullshit. The second proposal was to set up a nonprofit and try to get a group of Bitcoiners that everybody can agree on and actually incorporate, transfer the domain to the nonprofit's control, and actually set up legally binding bylaws about how changes to the website are put through, which would actually allow this to be, a community ran thing that actually reflects the claim to be an impartial information source. Does Cobra want to do this? No. He literally asked for this to gauge people's opinions, and then just said immediately in the only reply, no, I'm never giving it up. I'm never fucking I might give it to Thamos, but that's it. Like, no. So Cobra, why did you ask for this issue to be created to gauge public opinion? If you're just no. Like, no matter what, you're going to keep control of this website. Well, Bitcoin Core had a meeting, and they decided that they'd already been in the process of kind of migrating developer documentation to bitcoincore.org. They've removed links to bitcoin.org from bitcoincore.org. And Cobra immediately, what are you doing? Why would I support or list Bitcoin Core if this nonsense gets merged? You see how he makes a backroom deal to generate revenue for himself by placing ads to specifically drive viewers of the website to a single place to buy Bitcoin. And when another, and his whole argument is it's my property, I can do whatever I want with it. So the owners of bitcoincore.org have a meeting, unanimously agree on removing links to bitcoin.org, and he immediately starts threatening removing links to Bitcoin Core binaries from bitcoin.org. Because, oh, how dare you take what's not my property and not funnel traffic to my property to generate money for me? How dare you? I'll just remove the binaries. I mean, like, it's like it is so blatantly obvious. He is just trying to slow step towards just full shilling Bcash. And he's just trying to do it slowly. Because if he just one day goes Bcash is Bitcoin and just starts changing all of the content on .org, everybody's going to call him the fuck out on it. Like he actually needs to progress in a way to give the perception of a justification, or it will all just blow up in his face.
Yeah, talk about drama, man. It's one of those where, yeah, that Bcash and Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. That argument just sort of keeps coming from everywhere. It's not too surprising, seeing the .com then the .org go in that direction. But Cobra back and forth with those different opinions, and yeah, just sort of requesting that this have a say in GitHub, and then yelling back, actually doing it. It's one of those things that's just upsetting, but at the same right, it's like guys like us that are in there, it's like you're looking at Bitcoin Cash and it's like, well, first there's Bitcoin Classic, which if you want to say like, oh, well, it's the chain that's this, well, then it's Classic. And then you want to say, well, it's a minor chain. Well, now there's Jihan coin coming up, and what's a developer chain? There's Craig Wright coin coming up. They're already fracturing to the point of saying that is just absolutely a joke. So and the whole revenue side of Bitcoin.org and seeing that go down. I mean, yeah, that whole back and forth narrative with Cobra, that is something that I just tuned him out at this point, because it does seem like, okay, I don't know. I can understand, though, it's aggravating because a bunch of people that are newly on board, they see somebody from Bitcoin.org, and Cobra is somebody who's got a lot of followers and somebody who's the name in the space, and he's saying this back and forth. It gives people that confusion. And guys like us, we see it's not there, but it's probably doing a pretty good job of making sure these people that are getting into the ecosystem are doing it very slowly and timidly, and maybe even screwing up in the long run. So it's aggravating, man. This is one of those dramas where it's just like, I wish it would end. I wish we could expose it easily.
Yeah, I mean, it also shows, his perception of what the purpose of the website is, which, I mean, he used to say that, the purpose of Bitcoin.org was that it was a community site for offering information about Bitcoin. So, I mean, yes, I agree with him. It is his private property. That's why we probably shouldn't have been calling it a community project all along, especially if the person who actually owns the website has that perception of the website, is that its purpose is not a community project. It's for whatever purposes he wants it to be. One moment it could be for offering information about Bitcoin. and, you know, informing the community, and the next it could just be his way to generate revenue. So if he wants to see it as his private property and it's not subject to any kind of community feedback, or at least he's going to reject all community feedback, then we know where this thing is going and we should just let it go. And definitely agree with bitcoincore.org not linking to it, because I mean, if you're a project that the purpose of your website is to actually give information about software and downloads and making sure that people get, you know, the correct information about that, it doesn't make sense to link to a website that is basically being run for the profit motive of one person who may change his mind any day now, and who clearly does change his mind on a regular basis. That's not stable, so makes perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Like we just need to, like, Bitcoin does not have a website. We need to rip this Band-Aid off and just deal with it now. Like, it is blatantly fucking obvious. I feel like I've had to say that way too many times this episode. What he is trying to do. He is pushing this proof of work change nonsense because it is a horrible idea for Bitcoin and is nothing but an advantage to Bcash. He is continuously humoring Bcash. He is constantly legitimizing it and walking further and further towards that direction. Like, this website is going to flip to shilling Bcash. People need to stop trying to reason with him. He's a liar. He's inconsistent. He is constantly incoherent. Just get it over with. Stop pointing people at this website. Point people at other things. Make your own website. Like, there's other sources of information. I mean, like, we've shown it a few times. There's that Cypherpunks Wikipedia that's compiling all kinds of information about this space going way back to the original Cypherpunk era, not just stopping at 2009. Like, stop pointing people to that website. Stop legitimizing it as Bitcoin's website. I mean, point blank, just stop making Cobra money when he is so obviously being malicious and underhanded. Like, point people somewhere else.
It was nice whenever you could say, like, oh, here's where you go and you could get some proper information. But yeah, ever since, yes, 2016, it's kind of become the information war, hasn't it? I wasn't sure.
And also, I think something else redirects to it.
Yeah, lot.net and bitcoin.cc, I think, is that redirect.
Mm-hmm. All right. Ready for next up, Janine?
Yep.
Go.
So we've had another post from the Foreign Ministry of, well, you actually don't have to show the Google Translate, but yeah, we've had a second post by the Foreign Ministry of Ecuador, once again reiterating that they claim that the President Moreno has not made any kind of official proclamation, not ordered the departure of Julian Assange from the offices of the Embassy of Ecuador in London. And so they basically reiterated that even though he made some statements while he was in Spain, apparently, about how Assange's asylum cannot be prolonged forever, and at some point it will be necessary to make him leave. He still says that he's in conversations, or will be in conversations, with the UK, and through that dialogue we will find the best mechanism of rapprochement, I think. Not sure what that word translates to. But he does qualify that by saying that they will be respectful of human rights and international standards. And let me see. So they do not consider it appropriate for Assange to remain in asylum for life, but they apparently, one of the criteria that they're going to have when they talk to the UK is that they are going to make sure he doesn't then get extradited to the US and face the possibility of the death penalty, which is apparently a very real thing. So they are going to make it as part of the agreement when they extradite him either directly to the United States or to the UK that he not have his life endangered. Of course, having your life endangered is a broad spectrum of things. Your life being endangered could just be being imprisoned for a very long time, like he already has, and has not had any kind of access to healthcare, which has impacted not only his mental health, but also his physical health because he has not had access to sunlight. He, I think, has had some dental things that he hasn't gotten looked at. And I think he also has something with his shoulder, or some kind of muscle pain with the shoulder. So, I mean, not necessarily life endangerment, but collectively all together, those things can put someone's life at risk. And that's not even beginning to talk about, the more pressing threat, which is a state actually coming after you to kill you, which the US could do. Although I do think that the dynamic with Trump will be interesting because, if one of the motivating factors with getting Assange is that they investigate him for colluding with Russia to influence the US election, that kind of undermines Trump's power. So Trump as president might not be interested in extraditing him to the US, or at least not being too strong about the charges that they bring against him. He might oppose that, and being that he has a lot of influence over the US Justice Department right now, that might cause problems with that case. I believe that you can actually go to a transcript, Shinobi, of one of the statements that Moreno made. So someone actually translated a transcript where Moreno was asked, you have recently met with, this is obviously in English, but it was originally in Spanish. You have recently met with the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. Have you received any request in this regard from the US administration? And he responded, we have discussed some big issues, commercial, migratory, security. In the security issue, we've been offered all of the support to have the technology and the elements that the US has to fight against narco-terrorism and the protection of borders. The reason they mentioned that is because Ecuador has had some major issues. I mentioned it before in the show, I think, that there's been a lot of violence on a portion of the Ecuadorian border, and it's been suspected that may in some fashion be orchestrated by the United States in order to put pressure on Ecuador, because then they will be like, oh, we need protection. There's violence. Who's going to come and protect us? What better than the world policeman, the United States? So that's an element at play. And also keep in mind, apparently the US also made a large purchase of oil recently from Ecuador. So yeah, definitely a lot of commercial interests. And I very much doubt that a lot of this is not being influenced by Assange's case, because, the US has put a lot of resources recently into Ecuador, and it's, from a strategic point of view, it doesn't really make sense for them to do that as strongly unless they wanted to get something out of it, and that would be Assange. There was also a post from Open Democracy Now, I think. Where is it? Do you have it, Shinobi? I think, yeah, I linked to this. Yep. So this, I just thought it was a really good summary of the status of the case, because they write, the idea is to gradually sow the seed that the case has nothing to do with the issue of freedom of expression and the protection that journalists and whistleblowers enjoy in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and the 1989 Whistleblower Act. Rather, what we are dealing with is a matter that falls under the 1970 Espionage Act, approved by Congress during the First World War in order to stop state secrets from being handed over to foreign governments. A piece of antiquated legislation that does not apply to the publishing of leaked documents in the media. The closure of the case in Sweden in May 2017 should have put an end to the embassy standoff and enabled Assange to travel to Ecuador for his protection. If anything, events over the last year have demonstrated that the argument that Assange has holed up, and most people will even go to the length of saying that he has purposely holed himself up embassy, so as to avoid facing sexual assault allegations in Sweden is wrong. He remains in Ecuador's diplomatic mission, despite the case being long since closed. So for all the people who are saying that this was only about Sweden and Assange was just evading justice from Sweden, no. That, like, all the people who think that it was a conspiracy that the United States was trying to influence the UK and Ecuador and all these other countries to hand over Assange, it's not really a conspiracy anymore, because it's very obvious that this entire case is, and the fact that he is still in the embassy and doesn't seem to have any reasonably good way of getting out of there, even though he is a citizen of Ecuador, and it should be completely fine for him to leave the embassy of a country that he is a citizen of and go to a different country under diplomatic protection, especially since he was given diplomat status, should be completely reasonable. And it doesn't also make sense that the UK would undermine its diplomatic agreements to uphold that, just to catch a guy who broke bail for an investigation that is now closed. It just doesn't make sense. Like, all of these countries are undermining the standards and the principles and the international human rights law that they supposedly agreed to, just to make sure that a guy who jumped bail, maybe worth 3 months or so of jail time, is punished. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's really aggravating to see this, like the U.S. going after Julian like this and the level at which it's happening. But I do think it is kind of like this dynamic between, like you're saying, Trump and the DNC, because, I mean, I've seen since this whole, case being pushed against Julian Assange, a lot of pushback as far as like, this is, the DNC is endangering the principles of the free press. And like, I don't know how much they even really give a crap about that, because I know that they passed some legislation recently that allowed, information that's not exactly truthful to be published, as far as propaganda and stuff like that. So it's just really upsetting to see. And especially whenever you, like you're saying, I mean, supposedly it's all about some, Swedish secret sex or something like that, and that's why you're gonna have a death penalty for the guy. I don't think so. It like, when you look into this, I mean, I'm just sort of digging around as you're talking. I see this, like, DNC lawsuit claims that Assange harbored animosity towards Clinton, was in touch with the Trump campaign, and timed the release of his documents to harm the Clinton campaign. And another one says the lawsuit is about illegal foreign intelligence operations against the United States by a hostile adversary that found active and willing partners in the Trump campaign, as well as WikiLeaks, which acted on the behest of the Russians. Which, it's just kind of crazy, because the way that American diplomacy is supposed to reach out to different nations, we're supposed to be in contact with these different nations. And the fact of the matter is, like, it's legal if there's Russian companies here that they can lobby the government and do things like that. It all just seems to be about, you pissed off Miss Clinton. And Miss Clinton, or the Clintons, are not going to just let you walk from that. And the idea of a death penalty and killing the free press and all this stuff that goes against what America's supposed to stand for. And like, we're in Bitcoin because these financial back dealings have really blurred the lines as far as who's actually on our side of everything. I mean, to me, as somebody that's that's put on the uniform and went over there and done some stuff where, I feel kind of like I've put skin in the game. It's really aggravating to see that this is coming from within our own country, and it's just this horrible thing that's being pushed against Americans as far as what we're supposed to stand for as freedom, as rights to these liberties and individual liberties, and freedom to have a right to privacy, and all these right to free press, to the legitimate information, like all this stuff. Like we were saying earlier in one of these stories about how like the legal lines are just blurred because of ill-defined terminology within this highly lobbied legislation. It's super aggravating. I hope that Julian gets out of there, some sort of backroom deal going on between legitimate news sources out there within the global community that understand how important it is that that sort of thing doesn't happen, because that could cause a chilling effect that's just too great. I mean, it would be horrific if any of these people that are actually out there trying to do some real investigative reporting and doing some real, fact checking and all that stuff, to where, that they even got this guy that was sitting in the Ecuadorian embassy for 6 years. They, how are you going to get that guy out and everything? They still got him. It would cause a terrible chilling effect, or possibly just an outright revolt towards that sort of thing, as far as like America standing for that. I mean, we've seen some terrible things here in the past decade, as far as, these legislations and these blurry lines, as far as the United States assassinating their own citizens, as long as you're just, oh shit, I'm lagging out. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole fucking thing is just blatantly obvious. Like, he pissed off powerful people, and they don't want him being able to continue doing that. Like, I mean, like, think about, like, aside from the entire DNC leak, what was the other thing he also, like, dumped out as far as, like, huge leaks recently? Vault 7. Like, the fact that the CIA and the NSA literally have tailored, like, penetration tools to pretty much make it forensically look like any other country that they want. I mean, like, it's like point blank, he's calling bullshit on, like, people who are just playing all kinds of shady background games that have, like, just insane consequences for the balance of power in the world, for the course that politics and political interactions take. And they don't like that. They like pulling the strings and not being seen.
Yeah, man, I don't know where I got lost in that whole rant, because honestly, the whole thing's just upsetting to the point to where I kind of get lost in it, because it is one of those things where it feels like this is the reason why I'm in Bitcoin. This is why these things are so pressing. This is why I get aggravated with the disinformation and slowing the process of actually getting this thing running, because a lot of this stuff is allowed to take place because there isn't any sort of real unit of account or measure as far as what's legal, what's not. I mean, even these people running around with these fake bills in their pockets thinking they're rich, it's just, everything's all backwards, and we need something to stand up and sort of take accountability. And yeah, I'm putting my faith here in Bitcoin on that. So hopefully we can move forward with this. Guys like Julian Assange and people that are actually doing the right thing can move forward in a conductive way that is actually going to help people.
Yeah, and I made a tweet 2 days ago because there was a lot of stuff in my timeline about apparently, I think at least the voting system in Georgia, the voting machine in Georgia uses, I might be wrong about this. I think they were saying that it was using Windows 32, or at least a very outdated version of Windows. And something about it, all of the machines had the same password on them, and the password was ABCD. So yeah, very, very embarrassing. So I made a tweet about how the US should reevaluate its massive federal budget for influencing other countries' elections and shift that towards building domestic voting infrastructure that isn't an absolute joke. Like, if you don't want to be hypocrites, and if you want to actually put your money where your mouth is, and you think, the security of voting is important, why are you building it on a Windows machine with poor password security policies? Like, I don't understand. And it was, the reason I thought it was funny is because the people that were pointing this out were saying that made it increasingly likely that it was Russia, which I thought was hilarious, because actually that would increase the probability that any random script kiddie who, I don't know, wanted to pull a prank on the US government or just stir up shit would be like, hey, why don't I just like break into the system and change the votes? Now, I have no idea whether that happened, and I still don't think that it's likely, because there was actually a recount done by some security researchers, which we mentioned in a previous episode before. So I don't think it's likely that happened, and if it did, I don't think it actually diverged that much from what the actual result would if it did happen. But yeah, it's just weird to me that they're like, the more that you show that the voting infrastructure is insecure and built on crap, the more likely it is that, you know, any random person could have done it and not a state level actor. Like, because I mean, yeah, sure, they could have done it, anyone could have done it, because if you build your security infrastructure that poorly, you increase the chances of not being able to tell who broke into your system, because you have no way of evaluating how much it would cost to break into your system if anyone can just do it.
Oh yeah, the level of security as far as all this information goes and the way that it gets out, it's, you know, they just rather keep encryption broken so that they could know everything, even if it's kind of puts their systems at risk, because they're in enough power to where they can just squash that out, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, yeah. I don't know. Do you ready for this this Bitfi breakdown?
Oh man.
Yeah, more poor security practices and terrible marketing. Some of you may have heard of a new wallet called Bitfi by none other than John McAfee. And part of their marketing is that the wallet is unhackable. And I'm just going to say right now that John McAfee is not the only one using unhackable in their marketing material for crypto stuff. And so for anyone else who's doing that, shame on you. Just going to say it. So a security researcher named Ryan Castellucci, I think that's how you pronounce it, wrote a blog post about some very big red flags with this hardware wallet. First, he notes that their offer of $100,000 bounty for finding security vulnerabilities is a bit suspect, because it comes with this little note on it that says, this bounty program is not intended to help Bitfi to identify security vulnerabilities, since we already claim that our security is absolute and the wallet cannot be hacked or penetrated by outside attacks. Rather, this program is intended to demonstrate to anyone who claims or believes that nothing is unhackable, or that they can hack into the Bitfi wallet, that such attempts are futile and that the advertised claims about Bitfi wallet are accurate. That's already setting them up in a very hard place, because anyone who does find vulnerabilities, well, that basically breaks their entire marketing scheme to ever publicly disclose that, which makes it harder to, you know, convince users updating to the next, you know, firmware update is going to be important and things like that. So it's not a good position to start with. It doesn't actually work in terms of marketing. It was also interesting because he was pulling quotes from Bruce Schneier, who talked about, you know, the pitfalls in these kinds of bounty programs and why they don't work. Let me find it. Yeah, so they also claim that the hardware wallet's code is open source. It's actually not. They claim it's fully open source, but actually the code consists of PDF with some copy-pasted things about script and BIP32. So their code is not actually open source, which is pretty weird way of using source to make those kinds of claims. Let me see. And then he also at one point says he had to resort to decompiling their private key generator tool, which was hosted on the site of a juice company called Sun Orchard, in case you're interested, which is, I found so odd. Like, why are you hosting the private key generator tool on a juice company website? No idea. And then he also described part of the setup process. I don't know if he actually bought one. Is just inferring this from the snippets of code he was able to find. Let me grab it really quick. I have to scroll. So he says, if you're brave enough to go through this, enter, I believe, if you enter, I guess it's like you recover the key into the hardware wallet. So press Y to enter, to continue, or any other key to immediately exit and close this program. So if you're brave enough to go past that point, it will prompt you to enter a code for the cryptocurrency you're using, the address you want to recover the private key for, your salt, which is a user-selected value. They recommend using your phone number, social security number, or email address because, you know, those things are so secret, and a passphrase. The private key will only be printed if the address matches, but that restriction is not inherent in the algorithm. After a few hours, I was able to get a compatible implementation in Python. So, yeah, pretty suspect. And what was the last thing? He also, which I thought was really stupid, he found that the Bitfi wallet uses uncompressed keys, which result in unnecessarily large transactions and have therefore been deprecated for several years. So they're using, a lot of outdated software, not open source. He also notes at the very bottom of the post that after he published this, he found that Bitfi CEO Daniel Keshen had been in a legal fight with DS Healthcare, and the court ended up in his favor, but it's never a good thing when your business partner has prior negative history with the SEC, even if it goes in your favor, because, just not good, red flag. So yeah, because I think his specialty, he's actually given talks at DEF CON about brain wallets. And he gave a talk to kill the infamous brainwallet.org site, and the idea of the idea of turning a user supplied passphrase into cryptocurrency keys seemingly will not die off. So apparently the whole concept behind Bitfi is to generate a key or generate a seed, which is then stored as a brain wallet. That brain wallets are just, no, don't do brain wallets, guys. Not a good idea. Because as he points out, the biggest vulnerability in that is people's choices. People are not good at randomness. They will choose insecure passphrases as well, especially when you're recommending to use email addresses and social security numbers for your assault. Like, that's just stupid, because that information is increasingly not very difficult to find, especially after the stuff we saw with Equifax. So the idea that that would be a good use or a good source of information for making a private key or a passphrase is really not a good idea.
Oh yeah, this was something. Whenever I saw it, I was just like, man, what is this thing getting pushed out? And I'm glad you and this guy Ryan are bringing this to our attention, because it's definitely one of those where you want to get some competent guys behind all this stuff, right? Whenever it comes out, to sort of see before it could be too disastrous and it gets into too many people's hands. And it's definitely some red flags coming up from different angles here where you got to worry about it. You got to look into it. All this stuff is don't trust, verify. And if people are saying, trust us, here's $100,000 bounty, nobody's touched it. And yeah, there's definitely some more stuff around Bitcoin custody and like how you lock down your private keys and everything that involves more than just like, well, there could be a bug here and look, we're showing it's not getting hacked. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys digging into this. And I'm gonna have to look into it. It's definitely one of those where I've seen some people pushing it out there, and I guess everybody needs to get paid somehow, but this is definitely putting people at risk.
But it's secure. All right.
Oh, shit.
All right, Rick, we're ready to take us into the next one.
Yeah, it looks like we're kind of butting up against time, so I'll try and run through these two relatively quick. But we got some pretty big updates there from the institutional guys and Wallstreet and everything going on there. So late last year we saw the launch of the CME Bitcoin futures market, and now this past week CME is continuing to push Bitcoin towards institutional adoption with the first Bitcoin EFP, exchange for physical transaction, which two institutional traders, ED and F Man Capital Markets, which is a future commission merchant, and the crypto exchange ItBit, which is an institutional crypto exchange. So you could say here's two institutional investors. They swapped a position in CME's Bitcoin futures market for an equivalent amount of the underlying physical asset, which this transaction was negotiated off exchange with a broker and then reported to the exchange for settlement. So this is a pretty big breakthrough there for CME, as like they've only been accepting cash for the settlement of these Bitcoin futures. And rather than that, now people can do the actual underlying physical asset with the EFP transactions. So this new Bitcoin, exchange for physical transactions are going to help these traders divide their portfolios to hedge their positions and, help with leverage, capital, benefits, liquidity. These sorts of things are things that institutional traders are looking for. They're not looking for, well, there's this exchange with 1,600 different coins and you can do this and that without any KYC. They want onboards. So Brooks Dudley, of ED&F Man Capital says, every day we facilitate EFPs for our clients in physical assets such as soybeans, wheat and treasuries. EFPs on CME Bitcoin futures market mark an important step forward in the maturity of the regulated derivatives market for digital currencies. And Paul Ciavardini, sorry if I mispronounced that, director of ItBit's over-the-counter desk, commented on how these EFP trades will help reduce the friction in the marketplace. And, like we were saying earlier, as far as ETFs and what they're allowing to bring, like this is a step forward here for where there is now a different instrument for people to get the underlying asset of Bitcoin in the futures market. So it's going to be a great thing as far as just helping all these different indexes and things that are brought online as far as price, underlying spot price for these ETFs. I feel like this is a big development in that. And you can go to that tweet from CME, like we can see like how much the growth of these futures have grown in volume since they were launched in December of last year. They've grown of 375% from around 1,000 contracts a day back in December to over 5,000 this month. So a lot of people feel like they're getting a little bit more confident with these futures markets as being a legitimate place to onboard into the space. And now that they have access to these EFPs and the underlying asset, I think, we're going to probably see some more hodlers and just more possibilities as far as this, indexes and ETFs and just making Bitcoin look more legitimate in the eyes of these traditional financial institutions. So, yeah, that's basically the story is what's been going on with the CME futures and now allowing this EFP to go on. I think that's a pretty big deal, man. What do you think about it?
I think this kind of backs up what I said during the first story with the traders and institutions who want direct exposure to Bitcoin. They're going to find it. Like all you're doing by doing things like an ETF is just forcing them to use other options.
Yeah, I'm just like we were saying earlier also about how this whole thing is just I don't know, it's making this thing look more legit to where people like the Nasdaq and all these guys are actually willing to basically move forward where we've been left behind as far as the advancement of the space and allowing people to get involved in the onboarding and just allowing people to make trades in the space and having that legal framework in place. So that's a pretty good little segue into this next story, which, Nasdaq, they had a closed door meeting in Chicago this past week with about 6 companies from the crypto and traditional market and our exchanges. And someone familiar with the event, which is our only real source, I've dug around to a couple of different articles and it's always just someone familiar with. So he says that the focus was to encourage the industry to do things that will improve its image and validate its potential role in global markets. Which when I saw this and I saw the Bitmain story, I was kind of immediately thinking like, oh, okay. And the Coinbase finds Coinbase innocent. Oh, okay. So they also went in to say this, someone familiar with the event said that this won't be the last meeting, adding that there will be an ongoing dialogue among the participants. Wallstreet's been slow to move into the space due to crypto's history of illiquidity, theft, fraud, and the lack of custody services. So earlier this year, Nasdaq was hired to take on the role of conducting some market surveillance for Gemini, as well as the auctions that price in CBOE futures. And they also disclosed this week that they are supplying technology to 5 crypto exchanges, which we only get the names of 2, Gemini and SPI virtual currencies. A Nasdaq spokesman declined to comment on the story, but confirmed that it did take place, the meeting. And Gemini also didn't respond for a request to comment. But they also discussed the topic of the implications of future regulation for cryptocurrencies, what tools are necessary, and what surveillance will be needed. So I kind of did a little bit of digging as far as like what is this technology they're using, and what's Nasdaq doing behind the scenes. And I found this article from June 6th, which we'll add to the show notes here in a little bit, where you got a few good quotes there from CEO Adina Friedman. Spoke on the subject. If you go down past the blockchain technology part, it goes down to the cryptocurrency part. It says, what we are seeing, which I think is encouraging, is that a lot of exchanges are trying to become more self-regulated so that they have fair market rules, they have a great technology, they have a good surveillance over their activity, and that the first thing we started to do, and that's the first thing we started to do. We are the technology provider to a few of the crypto exchanges, and we continue to see an opportunity for us to provide our surveillance technology and our market technology to those exchanges. With regards to the partnership with the Winklevoss twins, Gemini Exchange, she says that they want to make sure they have a robust surveillance program so they can get rid of any potential market manipulation. It wants to be sure that if it can offer a future instrument such that you can rely on the price formation and the availability of pricing of the underlying exchange, it wants to wait for the market to become more regulated, more mainstream before it decides what its role should be. So I feel like they're just basically, like we're saying, as far as shoring up what the regulatory framework is going to be in these self-regulatory bodies, and trying to just come together with Nasdaq and the traditional exchanges, the crypto exchanges, and just put together the process to where the SEC is going to be happy, the CFT is going to be happy, and the government's going to be happy as far as people buying this asset and trading this asset, and how exactly that's all going to be put in place. And the CME EFPs, that's a good advancement towards that. And as much as I'm not that keen on surveillance technology, I can understand that these onboard ramps, the government is going haywire on. Everything's got to be KYC. But that's just for the time being. It's the way things are standing right now. It's the way we need it to be, to where the regulations kind of come into the framework that they're going to be happy, and we can kind of catch up with the rest of the globe there. So that's what's been going on with Wall Street. So hope everybody takes that as some positive news, even though there's a little bit of words in there that are kind of upsetting.
All right, so dive right into the next one. We only got like a half hour left, but
yeah.
More stuff going on Wall Street. It seems like a lot of big money is starting to second guess all the Ethereum hype. So Tetris Capital, New York-based hedge fund, is been pretty much shorting Ether since May, and they're pretty much just building up massive shorts right now, as well as Timothy Young, a trader who was what was he? It was known for the Social Cast, a tech startup he sold back in 2011, is also shorting ETH through Hidden Hand Capital in San Francisco. And Tetris, at least, published a 41-page report you can dig through if you want to. The links in the article in the show notes. Pretty much going through its entire reasoning for shorting Ethereum. And I mean, this is pretty much, by their words, one of the only 2 high positions they have, the other being their investment in Bitcoin. And pretty much a huge rationale for this is just the technology not really delivering. Like if we just something like CryptoKitties clogging up the entire blockchain, like they're really starting to question how a number of different dApps that are all, very widely used could actually function on the Ethereum blockchain. And I mean, pretty much like it's like, where are the solutions? Like they have all kinds of things being put out as rationale for how this is going to work in the long term, but none of it's deployed. I mean, Bitcoin is rolling out Lightning Network right now, actually building things out and deploying products. Ethereum's been talking about its equivalent of Lightning, the rated network, for 2 years now. They literally raised a multi-million-dollar ICO. They have nothing working to show right now. Like the plasma chain concept, is nothing to show right now. Like they're not actually following through and delivering anything. And some of these big funds are really starting to kind of see this. And this is something I say a lot when I talk about like what's going to happen in the space in terms of price, market capitalization. Like it's not going to be retail investors that really drives things up exponentially. It's going to be hedge funds. It's going to be wealthy individuals. It's going to be large institutional pools of capital. And like this report and these two people shorting Ethereum shows, like these people tend to do their research. It's very far and few between very wealthy people that got that way by just blindly listening to people and following PR headlines. They do their research. And another aspect of this is you have a million other things popping up now claiming to be like the Ethereum killer, like EOS, Tezos, this thing, Definity, I've never even heard of, like Tron. So like not only are we starting to see like cracks opening in the entire architecture of Ethereum and its viability in the long term, but you have a bunch of other things trying to like fill that niche. And so when you really look at a market like an ecosystem, like the liquidity that's allocating to that niche, all of these other things are going to start chipping away at it. I mean, like even things like EOS, you look into that, we've talked about a few times. EOS's architecture is no more promising in the long term than Ethereum. So like not only is just the rationale of this working in the long term falling apart, but there's other things coming in making the same claims that are going to draw liquidity away from Ethereum. And big money is starting to realize this and really position themselves accordingly as far as their market position.
Yeah, I mean, Ethereum really came out there with all the buzzwords that they needed to get these hedge funds to just throw them a lot of money. And, now that the space is really kind of taken off and you see a lot of these projects getting a lot of money, they're probably going to take a closer look at the tech whenever it comes to where they've spread their money around. And Ethereum is definitely one of those where when you start looking into it, you start to see some technical issues popping up relatively quick. And that's where you start to see these other guys really kind of taking their market share just because they offer the ability to develop without sort of these problems that you're running into as far as chain bloat and multi-sigs, and like we got the parity wallet that's frozen where there's like a discussion about whether or not they should be bailed out, and there's lots of problems there with trying to create a decentralized system with a leader, and there's just all these sort of technical aspects where when you're trying to build this ecosystem out, you start to recognize pretty quickly are going to hinder you in doing that. And so I think these hedge funds might have finally started to take a closer look into this. And these guys, I'm not going to say like, hey, it's going to go down because like, geez, I was saying that back when Ethereum was like $10 or something. So, I'm not going to say that, but I mean, I could certainly expect as more of these guys start to take a look and they start trying to, they move their financial instruments to do them and serve them. I mean, if they got an underlying, if they got Bitcoin and they're also heavily invested in that, you might, see them starting to short the market and of Ethereum and trying to just, build up that Bitcoin stash, because whenever it comes to technical developments and you start looking into these things, you start to see we got Wasabi Wallet, we got Samurai Wallets, we got CoinJoins, we got Lightning, we got all this stuff coming up to where it just gives a high room to move up in the process of scaling the actual ecosystem and trying to do something meaningful. So hopefully more guys will take a look at this and we can kind of get there quicker. But like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of lobbying efforts and money within the system to try and hinder that. So I don't know. We'll see how far it goes before everybody starts shorting ETH.
Alrighty, and slide along. this is the peak of irony. So apparently somebody created a Thunder Message, a decentralized Reddit, where Lightning payments take the role of up and down votes. And it is being flooded by Bcash screaming about how Lightning Network is a scam and Bcash is the one true Bitcoin. And I mean, like, just wow. Like,
yeah, man, I really like the idea. I was digging through it going, hey, this is awesome, because, Steemit tried to do it. And a lot of this whole idea of like, where can you find information that's actually worth something? Maybe this is sort of the way to do it, is where there's actually a real value tied behind the information before somebody decides that it's worth a read or something like that, or even a post. But it is pretty funny whenever you try to astroturf your narrative against the network at your putting it on. That's peak irony. That's some irony. We're running in all that.
It's just, I mean, the whole Bcashers spamming this with Lightning, saying Lightning won't work, is hilarious. But like, honestly, I don't really like things like this in terms of like trying to use micropayments for upvotes and downvotes, because when you really get into it, like, it's like the rationale is that people won't manipulate things because it costs money. Whereas, like, some average idiot who's just trying to spew nonsense because there's some idiot on the internet, it might disincentivize that. But that doesn't really scale up to like big moneyed interests. I mean, like, if some company finds it worth it, spend a few $1,000s spamming some message or some advertisement all over the place to keep it visible and actually get a return on that, they're going to do it. And so really, like, it kind of helps in the very low end, but when you go up to the top of things, it doesn't really fix the problem. And I mean, in terms of like, things like Twitter or social media, like, I think it's going to be more productive to look at like not paying to upvote or downvote content, but paying to just post at all. Or if you're moving towards something more decentralized, paying to get served content. So like a micropayment to get access to somebody's tweet. And like that way, like from a more centralized perspective, like paying to actually post something, one, it's a revenue stream for the business, like something like Twitter. And two, it's going to make it harder to Sybil attack things. Like, I mean, again, like still you're going to have like big money interests like doing it, but like it incurs a cost to actually post something, not just manipulate its visibility. And so I think it's much more like effective to really look at things that way instead of like what gets up to the top in terms of views. And then from a decentralized point of view, like if you're trying to move away and like create a more censorship resistant social media platform, then again, it's like a revenue source for the people actually serving content. And it kind of acts as that incentive to not censor things, because you might not like what some individual or person is saying, but you're going to keep it around because there's going to be somebody out there willing to pay you like a fraction of a cent to send them that tweet so they can read it. And so you like, instead of again like bringing money into manipulating what's visible, now it acts as an incentive to make sure that things aren't made invisible, because like you won't really care in the end like what it is. It's like, okay, somebody wants to pay me for that, I'm going to keep it so that when that person pops up, I can make money off it.
Yeah, I guess I want to clear this position just a little bit with just saying like, sorry, I got kind of mixed up on my keys right there. But yeah, I just think this is the first iteration of something where, a cost incurred for the message is something that is interesting, that could be, used in other areas. Like, I don't really like the Reddit model as far as, like upvotes get you, more visibility. And then, there's lots of ways you can manipulate that, and you just keep that visibility there. But as far as Lightning to be used for messaging and to avoid spam and try and clear that little mess up, that's something where I find the idea promising. But it is definitely something where this is just sort of a first iteration of that. Like we're seeing the first iteration of a lot of stuff with Lightning, as far as like Satoshi's place, and I know that the Samurai guys are working on that Whirlpool, and there's just lots of different things where these are first iterations. I wouldn't expect them to be perfect coming out the tube, but it is nice to see that development going on.
And then next up, we have Coinbase struggling for relevance and struggling to maintain that market share.
Oh.
And this actually makes a little sense looking at them deprecating merchant services. They've apparently partnered with a digital gift card platform, WeGift, and are moving to integrate digital gift cards directly into Coinbase, so that you can pretty much just swap over into a digital gift card directly through Coinbase. And I mean, like they start deprecating merchant services, as we've seen with Cheap Air kind of eventually moving over to BTC Pay Server as a alternative. Now they're just like it's really kind of fucked up. Like they pretty much shut down things to enable people to directly accept Bitcoin, and now they're just trying to shuttle their users into, well, just buy these digital gift cards through us. You don't need to pay a merchant Bitcoin. And I mean, it's like this really, at least to me, it seems like a weird out of left field shift into how they're trying to create like their ecosystem. And it seems to me to push in the direction of just like completely closing things off, like in key management, and like that's pretty much what they're doing. Like this is a step in the direction of creating a completely walled garden. Like, no, you can buy your Bitcoin, you can pull it off. Maybe, this has me kind of wondering what kind of restrictions they might be considering for withdrawals now. But if you want to spend it, just buy this gift card from us. Why do you have to actually like pay a merchant directly in Bitcoin? You can just do this.
Cash I'm sorry. It's like, I mean, it is kind of ridiculous. They're fighting the struggle for relevance. And this is one of those things where it's like, wait a minute, is this 2015 again? I mean, like we're seeing EFPs from the CME, and then Coinbase is going back to gift cards, and, gift cards. I understand that, there's some arbitrage there. I've heard some very weird stories of people getting great deals with their Amazon gift cards because they work for Amazon in India or something. And so they do some weird arbitrage there to get more for their funds. But it does sound like it's just being more like a walled garden, and they're trying to become this, hey, we're going to control all these private keys and we'll move up and down with the market. But yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to get those. That's, Cash App, people. Let's go to the Cash App. Get out of Coinbase.
Well, I mean, it's seriously like it makes me wonder. Like this is pretty much trying to just completely push people in the direction of just get a gift card. You don't need to patronize like Bitcoin merchants. Like they've already shut down and like started sunsetting their merchant support. And I mean, look at all the problems. Like they're literally facing a class action lawsuit. One for holding Bitcoins for people who aren't even their customers because they were sent coins through like their internal email transfer. They're facing another class action lawsuit because of just completely blocking people from accessing their funds. I mean, it really makes me wonder, like, are they going to really like try to shift in the direction of having some crazy bar that you have to meet to even withdraw your coins? Otherwise, they can just go, nope, sorry, that's the new terms, and just try to like wall people into just do everything through Coinbase.
Oh, I'm afraid that you might be right on that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, cash. Like, when the hell are they going to start accepting external crypto deposits? Like, I want to cut up my Shift card and walk the fuck away from Coinbase, but I have no options at this point.
I really
give me one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think they are really just kind of waiting for that whole regulatory framework to be cleared up between these agencies to where they can say that they're doing this with a surety that they're doing it the right way. Because the Cash App, Square, Jack Dorsey, these guys aren't just gonna wild west it out there. They're trying to do things the right way. So I think that I'd love the fact that I could buy it from the Cash App and withdraw it immediately to cold storage if I'd like to do that. Because honestly, I've been trying to use that whole card system less and less, just until you're right, until they enable deposits and I can, because I haven't used my shift card in a few months now. I'm just like I'm avoiding it at all costs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I use it. I'm just in general fucking stingy with spending my bitcoins, but I mean, when I need to buy something, like that's it. I'm all in Bitcoin. Like I have to, and I just want to get the fuck away from this company.
Yeah, man, we will. They'll work off eventually.
Well,
right.
Shinobi, if you go to Berlin, you can eat burgers and tacos and stuff every day and spend Bitcoin directly at room 77.
But then I have to move to Berlin and deal with the Berlin cost of living and all the fucking taxes in Europe and lose my really kosher deal with cheap ass living expenses right now. God bless fucking low key landlords.
Yeah. I'd like to get out there though and check it out one day, man. Supposedly all those taxes actually pay for some nice public utilities and services.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, your tax money gets wasted and bolsters up this gigantic, healthcare, public transportation Goliath instead of, contributing mostly to the military industrial complex.
Visit, yes. Live, I don't know.
I don't know. I like, yeah. One day, I'm gonna get out there and check out those mountains, man.
All right, though. Updates from Africa. So, everybody loves to talk about how Bitcoin mining is going to incentivize renewable energies. Well, that is exactly what's happening in Morocco. So, Brookstone Partners, a firm in New York, is looking at establishing a coastal wind farm specifically for mining operations. And, this is 900 megawatts is what they're trying to establish here. Like, this would be a pretty nice thing. I mean, obviously, like an American firm bankrolling things, they're probably going to want to kind of recoup costs, get a cut of operational profits. But that being said, if this doesn't kind of start a trend of just Western countries storming into Africa and utilizing resources for their own benefits without giving anything back to the local communities and economies, I mean, this could really be a very positive thing. I mean, that's like it's definitely something like present in Africa, like especially areas like Nigeria. Like there's a solid Bitcoin presence, but I haven't really seen indications of the type of growth really going on in Asia or America, Europe. And if that kind of foothold really gets in, then maybe like we could see like people in Africa actually looking for investments to do their own operations instead of have an equity firm from New York step in and kind of bankroll things entirely for themselves. We can start seeing that infrastructure build up. And I mean, it's definitely something I want to see happen. I mean, it's like it would be such a net positive for Africa's economy to really see Bitcoin get integrated early, like as early as possible, and really expose countries there to the upside. I mean, like, just look at, like, what Papawasa is doing in Ghana, trying to kind of speak to the central bank there in terms of, like, getting a little bit of exposure in their currency baskets, and just how that can really facilitate things in the long term as capital to put down on loans, like reinvest after it appreciates. I mean, like, if you get in early enough and we continue seeing massive upside, like, that's collateral you can put down on a loan that just continues paying itself off. Like, the kind of money that would free up for infrastructure investments and just kind of turning back into local industry and the ability to manufacture, instead of this, like, really fucked up dynamic where it's like, here's our resources, and they throw them off somewhere else to be turned into products and then sold back. Like, actually, like, take advantage of those economic opportunities locally. Like, it could do wonders for that continent, when, like, they've pretty much just been stomped on for, like, all recent history by other countries and continents just exploiting their resources. Like, Bitcoin could be the thing that really allows them to bootstrap and start making use of their own resources. And I would much rather see that happen than Bitcoin just be another thing that draws in foreigners to take advantage of resources there.
Yeah, it would certainly be a great thing for Africa. And it's also just be a great thing, I think, for the renewable energy mining sector to sort of show a little bit of like a pushback on that narrative as Bitcoin consumes more electricity than the top 10 countries in the world combined, or something that's going to get pushed out next week. It's a little bit of that argument kind of goes. I've heard that argument pushback as far as renewables don't really add up to that much, but it at least is a good optics, I suppose. And I really do feel like if the mining renewable energy departments kind of get together close enough, you'll start to really see some efficiency gains in these wind turbines and solar cells, and the way that they actually produce energy and how much output they get per, solar cell, or per whatever. What is that? The turn of the turbine. So it's something I'm excited about, just to see like the whole renewables and mining get together. And yeah, as far as Africa being able to actually keep some of their income there within the country, as far as their resources and the way that they're producing, energy. I mean, I think that's a great thing. I mean, there's a lot of free space there in Africa. There's a lot of, I think you can fit China and the United States and Japan and all these different countries there in Africa. So definitely some space there to build out some sort of renewable energy grid to start mining Bitcoin, and maybe find all those efficiency gains, and Africa will become Bitcoin rich. I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on for sure. I really like the idea of renewables and mining, like I'm saying, and hopefully there'll be some real, cross discussions between what the miners are doing and what the renewable energy guys are doing, and maybe find some real efficiencies because there's a profit motive there.
Mm-hmm. It's just, I just hope it goes the right way and not the wrong way. But in other news, Bitgo is updating their UTXO management and claiming that their process will save up to 30% in fees. So really, this is, I don't know. There's a little bit of language in here that I think is pretty hilarious. First off, Mike Erdhart is the developer kind of in charge of this, and he had previously done some work on coin selection that was actually merged into Bitcoin Core. But pretty much what Bitgo specifically is going to be doing, and the funny language is that they're calling this proprietary technology. And if I find out they have a patent on this, I am going to scream and troll Bitgo on Twitter until I get blocked. Because the proprietary method is pretty much just do things like normal if the fee rate is above 10 satoshis per byte, and try to use as few UTXOs as possible in a transaction. And if it's below that, sweep large amounts of dust inputs to consolidate things at low fees. So, I mean, this is I am glad to see BitGo implement this, because a lot of, exchanges and businesses in the space use their services. But I think the idea of calling sweeping small outputs when fees are low a proprietary technology is just beyond fucking absurd. I mean, like this will be nice when we start seeing fee pressure build up again, but like I said, if there is a patent on this, that's just fucking insane. That's the equivalent of patenting, I'm going to save money by only doing things when they're cheap to do.
Yeah, I kind of recognize why they're doing it, but it, like you're saying, I mean, there's some questions about it, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, are we ready for the last one? It's a funny one.
Oh man, which one is it?
Well, it's a single point of failure.
Oh yeah,
Google yanked the actual Metamask from the Chrome store and left phishing scams up. So, not only is this a little bit of Schadenfreude hilariousness on the part of Ethereum, but this is a real serious issue in terms of central points of failure in the space. I mean, especially when you're looking at mobile applications for smartphones. I mean, things are distributed through the Play Store or like the App Store for iTunes, and they're pretty much in complete control of things. Like, that's like just a reality you have to deal with. And I mean, there's like this is something that needs to be kind of taken into account and explained to new people coming into the space. Like, this is a potential security vulnerability. And I mean, some wallets like Samurai, for instance, they distribute their application through iDroid, like another app store alternative. You can download the actual APK file and just install a binary, although that is something where there are other attack vectors there. You should actually verify what you're installing before you actually put it on your phone. You don't have the protections of something like the Play Store in the process. But I mean, like, this is something to consider. I mean, for instance, like me, I have all of the automatic updates on my phone turned off. Like, that right there is a security vulnerability. If you let your phone automatically update your apps, bam, any wallet you have installed could be updated with malicious code, swapped out with something, and it's just going to happen automatically in the background without you noticing. That's a problem. Like, for instance, like what happened with MetaMask here. If Google is socially engineered or manipulated, you could have something removed, and then new people coming along to download a wallet, all of a sudden you're downloading malware. And I mean, like, this is something that really needs to be systematically looked at as far as how your average person is downloading software to interact with things like Bitcoin. Because right now, like, the way most people have their phones configured, like, there's a huge problem. Like, things can just go whoosh, and your coins are gone. And your phone is literally set up to just facilitate that. If that single point, Google or Apple, is able to be manipulated or hacked or conned in any number of social engineering. And I mean, it's like, it's really kind of silly to me how nobody really considers that or really thinks that through in the long term. Like, the same kind of issues are present for hardware wallets. Like, these are supply chain logistics problems that really need serious thought and processes established to deal with these kinds of threats.
I mean, I'm a person who considers it because I am one of those weird people that doesn't use smartphones. And so I don't even store cryptocurrency on my phone if I had a phone. And I would also tell people who do that if they want to store cryptocurrency on their phone, that they should only spend, or they should only store an amount that they would be comfortable carrying, say, as cash in their pocket, or maybe a little more than that. Because, this is the kind of thing you have to deal with when you have apps that are on smartphones. There's, a chance that, like, you don't even, it's not even considering like the vulnerabilities that are directly in the wallet itself. It's thinking like, how is this being affected at the operating system level? Especially if you're running a phone like Android. I mean, basically basically controlled by Google. Same with Google Chrome. And so, yeah, I mean, definitely you have to consider this, that if you're storing cryptocurrency on your phone, I mean, that's storing on your phone is better than storing it on a desktop because the environment is a bit more or a lot more constrained than most desktops or laptops. But I still think that if you're storing, like, I'd say more than several $100s, once you get $1,000 or so in value, you should probably just buy a hardware wallet, because that gives you the security and the usability. Although I guess, and then, if you're wanting to actually go out and send it, then you can just put whatever you need for the day or so on your smartphone wallet. And then, the worst that can happen is that your wallet gets compromised and you lose your petty cash for the day. So that seems like what more people should be doing. They shouldn't be like, I don't even know, have they actually said whether they re-added it to the web store? Like, did people actually lose? I mean, I assume that if people backed up their wallet, then they're fine. But if they didn't back it up, they might have just lost their keys altogether.
Yeah, I think it was within like 5 hours. It was back on the App Store, and it didn't affect anybody who had it installed. But they said there were a few instances of people downloading malware and phishing software, and I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's happened a few times now where Google has not done a great job of finding, whether an app is made by who it says it is. It should be relatively easy to figure out which one is the real one, because what most people do is they just look at, I assume, the number of installs, because it tells you how many people are users. And that's, as far as I understand it, that's relatively hard to fake. So I don't know how Google slipped up that easily in getting it out of the App Store.
Yeah, I don't know. Like you were saying, it's just like too much to be able to social engineer, and this like you're saying, we've heard this before. I mean, like how many times, like the Polo story about a Polo app on the Google Play, and it's like, oh, that's just malware, and they're gonna steal it. And yeah, definitely go the hardware wallet route if you're moving into the funds that are, in excess of, I would say, like I don't know the amount that's relevant to you, the person listening, but once you get to an amount that seems relevant, I would definitely move over to a hardware wallet. And even the hot wallets, like definitely have some sort of things there in place to where that you're going to be relatively safe, even with like the small amount that you're moving around on. I know that there's some unique tips there as far as just having certain phones and certain sort of stop mechanisms in place to where if it comes out of your reach, just like multiple separate passwords, if you got like a fingerprint scanner, things like that, and some sort of way for it to there's different ways. I'm not gonna get into all of it because I know that there's just like a bunch of nuance there, but certainly watch what you're downloading on the Play Store. I always look at the who's published it and the downloads, and then I'll even go to the Twitter account or the website from the people that are publishing the app to confirm that that is the actual app.
Yeah, just definitely something to consider especially when you're introducing new people to Bitcoin and pointing them at wallets or anything in this space. But guess it's time for final thoughts.
All right. Well, while Janine is loading up her final thought, I just kind of wanted to comment on the other day. We kind of had like a post about criticisms and, how we can improve. And I know that I'm saying, and I don't know too much. I understand that that's something where, I grew up in a real Creole Cajun language where people just sort of keep moving throughout the discussion. They don't really take hard stops, but I understand that's not exactly everybody's flavor. I'm trying to change it up. Please don't hold it too much against me, folks.
What? I'm perfect. I don't have any tics or anything I should work on not doing.
But here I go. I think the in the item, because I've been thinking about it a lot, because I'm like, okay, how can I stop this? And I start thinking about, okay, it's like you're doing this jazz speech where you kind of just keep going on, and in that you'll find these and I don't knows to kind of bridge the sentences instead of actually taking a stop break. So I understand it's frustrating for some. It's a little difficult to break the habit. I'm trying, people. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we all have our tics. We're all trying to work on them, and we're probably going to give a little more thought to production quality when we get to the end of the season. But we're going to keep working on it, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that helps me is that I actually write down a script of what I'm planning to say before the show. And obviously I can diverge from that, but it just helps me, keep it going in terms of flow and not saying too many ums and ahs and stuff. And when I do like that, and when I don't write a script, it's definitely noticeable to me. So if you want to try doing that, that does help in terms of not saying too much. Or
I write out a script and I will still find my because trust me, I've been redoing it and I'm like try to focus in on the script, and I don't know if I'm a little dyslexic or something, but I'll sort of stop reading and I'll just free flow it. I don't know. I'm pretty weird at discussion and the way that you read things. I do script it out, but I still do kind of veer from it every now and again. But like Shinobi's saying, I think everything's starting to come together in a way to where we'll start providing a good production for everybody to get there and get their information and not get too frustrated with the little things that we're carrying with us into this.
All right, Janine, ready for your thoughts?
Yes, I'm ready.
Go!
There's been a conversation in the past 2 weeks, especially on Twitter, about whether Twitter does shadow banning and what form it takes. And I think Twitter actually responded by saying we don't shadow ban. And I heard a similar thing a few months ago where Twitter or someone was defending Twitter and saying Twitter doesn't actually shadow ban people. It's just a database error or something. Which I thought was hilarious because it's like, oh, they just happen to have database errors with people who get like mass reported because they said something controversial or something like that. It just happens to happen, weirdly enough. And I thought this tweet from Nick Carter was funny where he says, we don't shadow ban, we just selectively censor users by algorithmically decreasing their exposure in a way that isn't immediately obvious to them. So, yeah.
Oh, some more words and...
To be fair, though,
Sorry.
I mean, I definitely think there are ways that attempts to game automated algorithms can definitely just happen, but it's like I don't know. I definitely see it happen, but at the same time, I don't think every instance of it happening is literally a direct attempt to censor. I think that there's instances where one explanation makes sense and where another makes sense. You know what I mean? Like people are obviously outside of Twitter trying to game these algorithms, but at the same time, I've definitely seen instances where that does make sense as an explanation.
Yeah, there's definitely seems like Twitter has taken off in the realm of like, yeah, there's crypto Twitter and there's all this alternative media Twitter. And, if something big happens, then everybody's tweeting it at the same time. And I could see technical holdups of like, you're not going to get everything, all at once. And you might miss some feeds and things like that. But I could certainly see how the system is gamed a little bit. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not quite sure, exactly if there's what exactly is going to solve the problem. But I could definitely understand like the fears in censorship because of just the way there's a general culture right now of like, you say what I don't like, and I'm going to scream at you till you don't say it. And it seems to be following it right there on Twitter. So I can understand the fears of censorship, but I wouldn't necessarily blame it on Twitter.
Well, what I also find funny because they're saying that they're trying to combat this and not have people getting shadow banned if it is random. In fact, use the same kind of weasel explanations as they do for blue check verification thing, where they've been saying all along that it's just for identity, it's not supposed to be a marker of importance or endorsement or anything. And then at the same time, they're like, oh, it's just a marker of identity. It's not about giving special privilege to a certain class of people on Twitter with extra features and all that. Like, there's definitely an advantage to having a blue check that goes beyond just having your identity be verified and not as easily copied by other accounts. So I don't know. It just seems like Twitter is using a lot of weasel language that they really need to clean up. Like if verification ticker is purely about checking someone's identity, then make it accessible to anyone. Don't add all of these extra features to verification as well, because that just kind of promotes the idea that having a blue check is just being like in the upper class of Twitter. Because I don't know why it would get you extra features just to have your identity verified. Because like the extra features that they give are things like having more muting options and things like that. So I don't know why other people can't have those features. Like, they're not special features that have to do with identity. They're about ways to better, I don't know, use Twitter search them. So it just seems they're not being consistent in their language and their choices. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with shadow banning.
And like we were saying earlier, a lot of it, all the just like terminology and misconstrued information as far as like, oh, well, it means this or it means that, and different interpretations and everything is always just like kind of leads to these errors. But when I was in Twitter, I went to Twitter headquarters for the Zcash thing, and I was talking to somebody there from one of the Twitter staff, and I asked them about the Ethereum scams, and she didn't know about it. And I don't know, it was one of those things where I tried to point her attention to it. I was even thinking about wearing a T-shirt to that event, talking about an Ethereum scam. But also, I brought up the blue check thing, and she was saying that is something they're talking about, and they're trying to fix it. And I think we've seen that even. Some people's checks are being removed and all that stuff to where they're trying to, I guess, figure out some sort of actual system to where anyone can get it. But that was just a discussion with a Twitter employee. So,
T-shirt idea: giving away free Ethereum.
yeah, man, I was thinking about it. I got to make that just to go in there.
Giving away free T-shirts.
Retweet this tweet, and I'll get a free tweet shirt.
All right, though, this next thought is one I share with Janine as well.
Yes.
Yeah, just want to reiterate, Bitcoin does not have an official website. Do not, take the easy road like several people did months ago and say, oh, it's just easier for noobs if we tell them that this is the official site of Bitcoin. No, it does not make it easier. It just makes it more confusing when months later, as we are now, we have to tell those same noobs that no, there is no official website of Bitcoin. Let's just keep it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, and a final thought in the form of a meme. Jihan's morning chant in the mirror: I am a benevolent dictator. I am a benevolent dictator. I am a benevolent dictator. See you guys on Wednesday.
Later, everyone.